There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of Soul of the SKOL. We got Samo, we got me, just like every week. And today we're here with some more good chats. Last week we broke down the Vikings draft class. They drafted 5 guys, and we went through that. And today we're going to go through a handful of the undrafted free agents. On a lot of teams, it's just kind of a whatever, dudes to fill your roster. But we've seen Kwesi be good at finding some guys and some diamonds in the rough. And not even just Kwesi, just in the past, historically, the Vikings have found some good undrafted players to complement their team. So that's what we're going to do today. Go through a list of that. And that's kind of that. The Vikings signed a total of 20 undrafted free agents. This brings their roster up to 89 out of 91 eligible players. They have an extra spot. The undrafted tight end they brought in is part of the International Player Pathway program, so he does not count, which makes an extra roster spot.
Yep.
The Vikings had the same thing last year with, I don't even remember the guy's name. He was a tight end, I think.
Yep.
I recall.
Yeah.
Played for Washington and maybe even the Bears. I don't know if he played for them, but he was on their teams at one point or another. Whatever, though. So that's kind of that. And like I was saying, they're at 89 guys. Their rookie minicamp is this weekend. I think it's tomorrow through Sunday. Then OTAs start in a handful of weeks. Might even be next week. Yeah. No, it doesn't look like it's for a couple weeks. But yeah, then they'll have a handful of organized team activities, which are optional practices, and then mandatory minicamp. And that is usually kind of the first or second week of June is when that is. So I suppose with that, we can start with the list. Going kind of by positions, the Vikings, we're going to start with quarterback here. The Vikings brought in only one quarterback, and it's a fairly notable person. You guys might be familiar with him if you watch actually this team right here, the Gophers. They brought in quarterback Max Brosmer. He spent a handful of years at New Hampshire before transferring to the Gophers, and he played there this past season. This past season, he set a school record for the Gophers with 268 completions. He had a PFF grade, of 84, threw for 2,801 yards, 18 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, passer rating of 94.5, and according to the NFL.com write-up, he was projected to be a 6th or 7th round pick, and the Vikings ended up snagging him. He was the number 2 ranked undrafted free agent quarterback, so that's kind of that. I used to watch more Gophers football. I really don't as much anymore, but if you're looking for like a crazy, dynamic, athletic scrambler runner, at least the vibes I kind of get is that's not really as much of him. He can move around, but he's not your Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen kind of guy here. He's kind of more of just a sling the ball. And yeah, that's kind of that. I suppose I know you're you're a Michigan fan, but yeah. I know you dabble in some Gophers as well. So you've probably watched him more than I ever have. But seems like people like him. And it's not like he's going to come in and do a lot. He's just kind of camp guy, but I honestly think he has a chance to be the number 3 quarterback. Brett Rippon doesn't move the needle for me. Sorry, he just doesn't add anything to me, but that's just me. But I think there's a legit chance he could be the number 3 behind McCarthy and blanking on his name. Howell. Just traded from Seattle. But yeah, if you got any thoughts, here you go.
Yeah, Brosmer's a 6-year guy, so he's an experienced quarterback. Obviously, he was the top quarterback in FCS when he came over to the Gophers. I watched almost every Gopher. I think I watched all the important Gopher games where they actually played an opponent with a pulse. So he's a guy. He's a good short mid-range game guy. He's not he does not have a big arm. But he's a guy who's a kind of a completion specialist. Like you said, he completed set the school record for completions at Minnesota in a season. So he's a guy that he can complete a lot of passes. He's not going to hit these super long deep balls, but he does come in as the QB4 right now. And Rippon doesn't really move the needle for me either. However, with his experience in this league, it's going to give him an upper hand automatically in training camp. So I think the path to the roster is slim for Brosmer. He's a guy who maybe, as QB4 in camp, you're kind of just handing the ball off, and, maybe he'll get some preseason action, and you keep him around on the practice squad maybe, and then, you never know what happens after that. But yeah, obviously fun little story. He's going to be a fan favorite here in Minnesota just because he played for the Gophers and he was a really, really good quarterback for them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't envision him making the 53, but I guess I could be surprised.
Yeah, as you were saying, I could totally see him being on the practice squad, just kind of sneaking through waivers. If no one picks him up, then he just can chill on the practice squad, and Kevin O'Connell can do whatever he wants with him. And yeah, always fun to see former Gophers, especially quarterbacks, just because that's who we're familiar with. I remember when Tanner Morgan was for like a handful of weeks or maybe even days last year. He was in Vikings training camp and then got the boot. Didn't last long. I don't even know if he made it to the preseason.
No,
whatever.
He was gone before the first preseason game.
Yeah. So that's kind of that. Long shot for him. Probably won't do much, but I guess you never know. He's a name around here that people know. So that's a little about him. Moving along, that brings us to running back. The Vikings chose not to draft a running back. Looking at their roster, they've got Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, presumably the 1-2 punch, followed by Ty Chandler, whom we've expressed on this podcast before. There's been expectations. He hasn't met them. I've personally kind of given up hope that he's really going to do much. Been thinking for years maybe he'll do something. He really hasn't. So I don't see much there. And then behind him, they've got Xavier Scott. He was signed him on a futures contract. Honestly, don't know anything about him. Think he's just kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And that completes the running back room aside from their new addition. Out of Jacksonville State, the Vikings signed undrafted free agent Trey Stewart. People were surprised that they didn't draft anyone. I was a little surprised by that too, but I mean, just looking a little into this guy, I think he's the equivalent of a draft pick, honestly. He spent 3 years at Limeston. I don't know how you say it. It was a Division II school, I'm pretty sure, before transferring to Jacksonville State. This past season, he put up 1,604 rushing yards and 23 touchdowns. That was the 5th most rushing yards in college football and the 3rd most touchdowns. So he got a lot of work and made the most of it. A couple other things I saw on write-ups. He's not a great blocker. I haven't watched any film on him. Seems like that's not necessarily a strong suit of his. And he also had 4 lost fumbles last season. So sometimes gets the butterfingers. And NFL.com just had him listed as a priority free agent. And I think, to me, this is kind of a no-lose situation. Maybe it won't work out, but I think there's only upside with him. Like we were saying, he had 1,600 yards and 23 touchdowns. So, and it's not from like a big-name school either.
No.
So, I mean, good for him. Top 5 in all those categories and probably more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I like it. Maybe he won't do anything. Maybe he will. I have a little hope that he actually might do something, just kind of looking at some of the stuff about him. But I've been wrong before and could be wrong again. But I'm excited about this one. And I think even just in training camp, it could just be kind of a fun training camp story. Even if he doesn't do anything during the season or doesn't make a living here. It could just kind of be something fun to watch.
Yeah, it feels like every year we get a running back, an undrafted running back that kind of makes some noise in the preseason, and he's always fun. And then he finds his way onto a practice squad. I think Trey Stewart could be that guy. Obviously, like you said, if you can't pass protect, you're not gonna get any sort of like major workload in this league. However, he played at Jacksonville State. They're coached by Rich Rodriguez, who's a very well respected coach, and Jacksonville State was one of the better group of 5 teams that they were up there with Tulane and Boise State. But yeah, it sounds like he's a guy with some good vision. I think he's a little smaller. So, guy you bring in for training camp, maybe again, he's probably fighting for a practice squad spot. Maybe he can sneak his way onto the 53 and play some special teams or something, but
yeah,
just fun story to watch.
So he's 5'8", 186. So you're right. He is on the smaller side of players. So that could also have to do with not being a great blocker. Could be small size. But maybe if he hits the weight room and gets beefier, maybe he can work on that. But who knows? That's just kind of a little bit on that. So as we keep moving along, that brings us to the next skill position group, and that's receiver. So the Vikings actually ended up bringing in 4 undrafted receivers, and we're not going to get into all of them. They brought in Robert Lewis, Dante Fleming, Miles Price, and Silas Bolden. And the only one to me that caught my eyeballs was Silas Bolden. And it's not really for his receiverage, if you want to say, it's for his returnage. He went to college at Texas. He spent his first 3 years at Oregon State before heading down south. This past season, he had 23 receptions for 267 yards and a touchdown. So, like I was saying, not too much of a receiver, but he is a good punt returner, including in the college football quarterfinal against Arizona State. He had a 75-yard punt return touchdown in that game. I think he's not, like I was saying, he doesn't add much to me as a receiver, but as a special teamer, I think he could potentially make a splash, especially with the Vikings seemingly moving on from Brandon Powell. They don't really have a clear punt returner. They've got some candidates. Jalen Naylor's done it. I'm not a fan personally, but that's kind of that. I know Isaiah Rodgers has done it before, so we'll see if they work him in, but I think he could be a candidate for maybe last wide receiver position spot and then special teamer, punt returner, that kind of a thing. So I know you're more of a college football guy. Did you happen to watch that game, Texas and Arizona State at all?
Oh yeah, that punt return was electric. That was I don't know if anyone watched. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, if you're watching, you maybe watched it, but that was a crazy game. Silas Bolden's a guy who's, he's a pretty good punt returner for Texas. That's probably, like you said, his path to the roster. Dante Fleming's that way too. I think the punt returner job is definitely one of those things to watch in camp. It's a pretty much wide open battle right now. It sounds like Rondale Moore is still dealing with some injury stuff, so who knows if he'll be ready to go. But Silas Bolden, I think Ty Felton's even returned some punts too. Ty Felton's probably going to make the 53 regardless just because he's the third-round pick. But, the guy who gets that wide receiver 5 to 6 job could very well be one of those two that is just wins the punt return job, and that's your way on the roster. So Silas Bolden, he's a smaller guy. So is guy out of Tulane who I just said his name and I can't remember it now.
Dante Fleming.
Yep, Dante Fleming. He's a little bit smaller guy. I think he's like 165 pounds, so he is 167 pounds. So
wow,
he's a small guy, which a lot of times punt returners are. So I think those two guys are really the only guys that are going to compete for the 53-man roster in that receiver room. But they still have a long path to the roster. And if one of those guys takes one to the house in a preseason game, then I think they like their chances. But other than that, I don't know.
Honestly, when was the last time the Vikings had a punt return touchdown? I don't remember. It's been so long. We've seen some kick return touchdowns from Kene when he was here. But punt return? Have they had any since Marcus Sherrills was here?
That's what I was
honestly
thinking. I don't think so.
That's kind of crazy.
Well, let's see. Chad Beebe returned punts. He never had one. Brandon Powell, I don't think ever returned one.
Sam Z's favorite player, Chad Beebe. He's a BB stan.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Powell was a guy who came in. He kind of he's kind of your fair catch guy. Just catch the punt, take over right there. And that's a fine strategy too. But if the Vikings, I mean, if there's a guy who can do it and get you some better field position, obviously you'll take him. So
yeah. So I just hit up ChatGPT and asked when was the last Vikings punt return touchdown. So hopefully this is accurate. ChatGPT says it was 2016, and it was Marcus Sherrills against the Houston Texans.
That sounds about right to me.
So that's kind of crazy. That's been almost 10 years since the last time they returned a punt for a touchdown. Brandon Powell did it against the Vikings in 2020 or 21, I think. They had a game at US Bank Stadium, and if I remember correctly, Powell had a punt return touchdown in that game and then proceeded to play for the Vikings the following year. That's the only thing I remember about him with the Rams is he had a touchdown against Minnesota at one point. But yeah, that's kind of that. As you were saying, it seems like the only path, same with a lot of these players, the only path they might have is being an excellent special teamer, at least off the rip, and then maybe they can make a splash or something. But especially with position players, specifically receivers, you kind of got to be a special teamer or bust at first in your career. So that's kind of that. Moving along, I saw some things about this guy. I don't know a whole lot about him. Coming out of Stanford and then into Georgia, tight end Ben Urosek. The Vikings actually met with him, I remember, during the pre-draft process. They also met with Brosmer. I don't think they met with Trey Stewart. Could be wrong, though. And as far as Bolden is concerned, I don't recall anymore. I might have got rid of that page on our spreadsheet, so can't go back and look, but that's all right. So, yeah, he spent 4 years at Stanford, I believe, and then transferred over to Georgia. This past season, he had 16 catches, 185 yards, no touchdowns, and a 60.6 PFF grade. He was also listed as a priority free agent. I didn't delve super much into like his PFF blocking and receiving. Seems like maybe he is more of a blocker considering he didn't put up big receiving numbers. Could be wrong on that. I'm just kind of going on a whim here. Yeah, you know anything about him at all?
Yeah, a little bit. So this is going to be another battle in camp. Is that tight end 3 to replace Johnny Munt? I think we've touched on that already. Gavin Bartholomew, obviously the Vikings spent a draft pick on him, so he probably goes in with the upper hand there. Ben Urosek is probably the other guy that's to watch out for, and if he beats out Gavin Bartholomew, which I don't think is super far outside the realm of possibility, he could be that guy that just replaces Johnny Munt. And, if he can get on special teams too, I think that'll help him. So, he's going to be a guy to watch in camp. They also signed a tight end out of North Carolina. I don't think he's going to be a guy that ends up playing.
Seems like camp body.
Yeah. So, unless he makes a bunch of noise, because that tight end 3 job is pretty wide open, honestly, right now. And, unless they bring someone in, like a veteran in or something, I think they kind of want to give this to one of those younger guys and see what it does. And I mean, the tight end 3 does get a fair amount of snaps in this offense, so it'd be interesting to watch.
Yeah. I'm with you there. Bartholomew probably has the upper hand, but like we talked about last week, Bartholomew doesn't really wow you a whole lot. That's kind of what we talked about during last week's episode.
Yep.
So just because they spent a draft pick on him and they didn't spend a draft pick on this other guy doesn't mean that he's going to be ushered into that spot. It is going to be a battle, and either guy, any guy could come out on top. So
yeah,
we'll see how that ends up rolling. Moving along, that brings us to the lines, specifically the offensive line. This player is the most talked about Vikings UDFA, at least that I've been seeing. This player started at Wisconsin before heading out to Kansas. He's also the thumbnail on this podcast, if anyone is wondering. He is a offensive tackle, specifically played right tackle for sure this past season and maybe beyond. I think he's had some flexibility around the line. He's 6'6", 311 pounds, so big old dude. 82.5 PFF grade last year. I just realized I don't think I ever said the guy's name. It is Logan Brown, coming out of Kansas. So yeah, 82.5 PFF grade this past season. He had 618 snaps this past year, gave up no sacks and no quarterback hits as well. He was projected to be a 3rd or 4th round pick on NFL.com. He's the 3rd ranked overall UDFA out of all positions, all players. On the big board, I did this over the weekend, so I don't remember some of these notes, but I looked on a big board, might have been NFL.com. Someone had him as the projected 160th prospect. And for anyone that isn't familiar, the NFL draft has between 255 to 260 picks. So the value is very good there on the big board. There were 15 hang on, I said that wrong. He was the 15th ranked tackle in the class, and there were 21 total tackles that were drafted, which means there were players that were projected under him that were drafted ahead of him, and a lot that were. So seems like hopefully he has some positional flexibility. Honestly, just based on some of the things I'm hearing, he could come in right away and be the swing tackle day one, honestly. NFL.com seems to think that he could be a backup right away and eventually even move to a starter role. That's how much they like him. Right now, the Vikings are solidified at tackle with Darrisaw and O'Neal, so they shouldn't have to worry about that, and even in the long-term future. But at the end of the day, O'Neal is like 29 or 30 years old, which he's still got life on him, but eventually he's not going to have life on him. So potentially they could hang on to him, do something with him. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people talking about him, and I think he could make a splash on this offensive line, even if it's not an impact right away. Honestly, he could have a future impact on this team. I guess that's what I think about this.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think he's the swing tackle right away. Darrisaw is going to miss the start of the season probably. So Justin Sclui is probably going to be that guy. He was brought in to do so. Not saying down the road a little bit. I'm sure. I mean, this is a guy who could, 100% make the team, and there's a pretty good chance that he will make the team. It sounds like there is maybe some flexibility, but I think a lot of people like him to stick at tackle. Yeah, the reason he went undrafted here, there's a few reasons. He had a foot injury that ended his season in 2023. He was dismissed from the Wisconsin football team, so there's no context on that. He just got dismissed.
I heard, could be wrong here, but I heard that it involved an altercation in practice is what caused it.
Okay.
At least that was what I heard from him. I was listening to a different podcast,
Yeah.
and that's what, I don't know where they got that from, but that's what they were saying.
Yeah. He's 24, so he's a little older. Only made 14 starts, but he's a big dude. He's 6'6". It sounds like he has pretty long arms, pretty athletic. So, this is a guy you kind of bet on upside, and you could stash him on the 53 for a year or two, and maybe he could become something. I think, Walter. I think he's going to push Walter Rouse for that fourth tackle spot, and I think there's a pretty decent chance he can beat him out, even though Walter Rouse was a draft pick. So
yeah. And kind of just looking at the depth chart, we talked about Darrisaw and O'Neal, and you were just bringing up Walter Rouse. At the end of last year, it might have even been in training camp. I don't really recall. He even got some work on the interior of the offensive line. He started to work with some of the guards. So there's a chance that he could kick inside there, and then that would leave other guys kind of more for the backup tackle spots. I guess that's another thing to watch in training camp. But obviously Logan Brown here. And you brought up Justin SKOL. I believe that's how it's.
Oh, really?
Great name. SKULE.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's coming from, he was a 6th-round pick by the San Francisco 49ers in 2019. This past season, he started 5 games in Tampa. He has 66 career appearances and 17 starts over his 5-year career. Last season, he played at left tackle and at right tackle. He's played 833 career snaps at left tackle and 234 at right tackle, and he also has limited experience at right guard. He allowed 12 pressures and 4 sacks across 213 pass blocking snaps last season in Tampa. So I guess he's not a crazy player, but at the end of the day, he's got experience and he's got starting experience.
Yep.
And that is really important in the NFL. So I think he could be a candidate potentially for swing tackle or just backup in general. But yeah, this Vikings tackle room, honestly, kind of loaded. They got a lot of players that could make an impact, whether it's now, whether it's in the future, even just as backups. Yeah, I think they got a good room there.
Yeah, so. And with Darrisaw, he's gonna miss probably the first couple games of the season. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I think SKOL is probably going to be the starting tackle week 1 just because of that in his spot. So, your swing tackle is a guy you look for who can, step in and just, hold that position down just for a little bit. So,
yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like we talk about with backup quarterback, you don't need a player that's going to go in there 17 games. They just got to hold down the fort for a couple until the starter is back again.
Yep.
So, yeah. So that's kind of that there. I've been meaning to say on this podcast, and I kind of have, but I really do appreciate how the Vikings overhauled the offensive line. They weren't scared to do it. And we saw this with Kansas City and how in that Super Bowl against the Bucs, Mahomes ran for his life on every second of every play. And then what did they do? Revamp everything. That they brought in Creed Humphrey that year. They brought in Trey Smith that year, and other guys too via the draft, via free agency.
No Tooney.
Yeah, they saw they had a problem. They addressed the problem fully, and the Vikings right now are kind of reminding me of that as well.
Yep.
They see problem, they fix problem.
Yep.
They hadn't seen, well, they had seen, but hadn't fixed problem in like 10, 15 years. Finally, they have fixed problem.
Yeah.
So, got to give my praise to Kwesi there. He deserves it for that one, for finally addressing it.
100%.
Hopefully it works out.
Yep.
Then moving along, that brings us to the interior of the line. Right and left are set with Will Fries and Donovan Jackson. Then they have Blake Brandel, who was going to be the starter pre-Donovan Jackson. And
yeah, he's probably,
we've talked about before, he's fine, but to me, not a great starter, but in a backup role, that's all you need him for.
Yep. And he still could be the starter. I mean, if Donovan Jackson, they want to sit him for a little bit, that's completely fine too.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. There's no problem with that. If they want to let him percolate because they decide he needs time,
yep.
At the end of the day, the best thing for these players is their long-term impact development.
Yep.
So if he doesn't start day one, that's totally fine. Doesn't make him a bust at all.
Just giving themselves options, which is always
good. Maybe I'm contradicting myself on Lewis Cine here a bit. Maybe I got to come to terms with that, because I just realized the same reason I criticize him is for not being a day one impact player, but at the same time, right now I'm advocating that not all players have to be an impact day one player.
Well, I mean, if he's 2 years in his third training camp and hasn't contributed anything, then maybe we can start talking about that.
I do want to be clear. All the times I criticize Lewis Cine for being, or all the times in the past I've criticized him for being bust, it has nothing to do with his injury. That's uncontrollable. You can't control the fact that you have a compound fracture in your leg. For me, the bust came from the fact that you're a first round pick, you should make an impact day one, which now I'm starting to kind of walk back on that statement. But he wasn't doing that. So that's, I think, what the criticism was. Just want to clear the air there for everyone again. It has nothing to do with his injury. But that's that. Hopefully all the best for him in the future. Is he still in Buffalo? Or he went to the Chiefs then, didn't he?
He was in Philly for a while.
Oh, that's what it was. I remember him being in the Super Bowl. Lewis Cine, what's this?
I think he was inactive.
Yeah, that's too bad.
But I don't know where he is now.
I don't even know. He is under contract this year with the
Philly
Eagles still, so.
Oh, maybe they picked up his 5th-year option. Or no, he's still on his rookie deal because he was a first-round pick, so he's got 4 years. Yeah.
I thought if a player gets cut, doesn't that nix?
Oh yeah, that's right. I don't
know. So it shouldn't matter. Only trades would matter in that context.
Yeah.
But who knows? He's an unrestricted free agent next year. The Vikings can target him again.
Oh yeah, they must have brought him back. They got him on a 1-year deal, about $1 million.
So we'll see if he does anything. Okay, moving along. Well, we were talking about Blake Brandel before the side street. Then they brought in Henry Bird. He's just kind of a no-namer. I think he sat on the practice squad last year, if I remember right.
Yep.
And then as a UDFA, this player started at Cincinnati before heading to Wisconsin as a right guard. His name is Joe Huber, another good football name. 68.7 PFF grade last year. He gave up 1 sack and no hits all year. He's got guard and center flexibility, so he can move all around the line, which could be a good thing. I mean, that's just a good thing in general when you can play multiple positions, especially on the offensive line. And he was projected a 5th or 6th round pick. So he's another player that could move around the line, could jump some of the other guys, low end roster spot, maybe practice squad even here. But a lot of these guys we're talking about probably won't make the 53, but they could be practice squad impact dudes. So just want to make that clear.
Yeah, Joe Huber, he's an interesting guy. It sounds like he has some center flexibility. I honestly think that might be his path to the roster. Like you said, he was a projected 5th or 6th round pick. That's about where Michael Juergens got taken last year. I think he was a 7th round pick.
I think he was a 7th. So yeah, he's the backup. I don't want to criticize Michael Juergens here, but Ryan Kelly, starting center, backup is Michael Juergens, a 7th round pick.
Yeah.
and maybe he'll be really good. I don't know that, but I don't know if I trust that. So
Um,
that's that.
being a trenches guy myself, he was kind of a disaster in the preseason last year. I'm going to be completely honest. He he just didn't have a good preseason at all. So I think he's going to be a guy that's kind of fighting for his life to make the roster here. And it might be kind of nice to have a backup center. Maybe that's a guy that they bring in, a guy who gets cut from another team on cut down day or something. But I think, Joe Huber, I think that does open the door a little bit for him for a roster spot. And maybe Michael Juergens comes out and has a great preseason and takes that job with flying colors. But I think, I think Joe Huber definitely has an into the roster if he can play center.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. Seems like they have the guard spots pretty solidified. Obviously, the starters, we know who they are. Will Fries, Donovan, or Blake Brandel. In the other one will presumably be the backup right away. But yeah, like we were just talking about, the center room, not as clear cut. Kelly, Juergens, like we just said, I don't know if I trust Juergens. So I could see him, I don't know about like being the number 2 center, but I could see him making a competition for number 2 center.
Yeah.
It's hard when your number 2 center potentially could be either an undrafted free agent or 7th round pick.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess that's just me there.
Which is why I think this leaves the door open for a cut down day guy that they bring in that gets cut from a different team and they bring him to do that job. But
they could always try and get someone off waivers, like when rosters go. That's what we were talking about. When rosters go from 90 to 53, you're trying to sneak guys through, hope no one notices. Maybe they can poach someone in that way. So, yeah, that's kind of that. Then moving along, they did bring in an undrafted center named Zeke Coral. Don't know much about him. Didn't have much information. Seemed like just kind of a guy there.
Yeah, I think he's more of a camp body unless he goes insane.
Then that brings us to the defensive line. They got a lot of bodies, especially on the interior. They brought in Alex Williams out of Middle Tennessee State. He's kind of buried on the depth chart, at least I would assume he is. So I don't see him personally making that much of an impact, but I've been wrong before. But then that brings us to the edge rushers, and they brought in this next guy here. He was the number 1 ranked undrafted edge rusher coming out of BYU, Tyler Batty. He was a 4-3 defensive end in college. That's what they played at BYU. And for context, the Vikings run a 3-4, so it's a different defensive scheme, but still talented. Vikings can still make it work out. This past season, he had a 78.5 PFF grade. He had 2 sacks, 29 hurries. Although he is 24 to be 25 years old, just like we were talking about. I think that was Logan Brown, might have been on the older end, but that's okay. Projected 6th or 7th round pick on NFL.com. So, yeah, here's another guy. The Vikings have been good at bringing in UDFA edge rushers. They brought in Andre Carter 2 years ago. Ended up not really doing much. I think he's in Vegas now.
Yeah, probably.
He sat on the practice squad for part of a year, and then I think they claimed him, and I don't know what's happening with him anymore. Then they brought in Gabriel Murphy out of UCLA, and if I remember, he was like the number 1 edge rusher last year, maybe even number 1 overall UDFA. He was up there. So, yeah, position, or how do I say this, scheme difference between college and the NFL, at least with the Vikings now. But at the end of the day, you got Brian Flores as your DC. He's going to make it work. He sees talent when he sees talent, and he sees what he likes. So that's why you brought him in. I definitely think he could make an impact, even as just kind of a rotational dude. Maybe not even year 1, but preseason, this guy could be a fun story throughout training camp. Kind of like Gabriel Murphy, except Gabriel Murphy was hurt, so we never really got to see that unfold.
No,
just too bad. Maybe this year.
Yeah, it's intriguing. Obviously, he's coming into a loaded edge rusher room. Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner are obviously going to be at the top of that. But, I mean, they'll probably keep 4 or 5 guys, so that opens the area for Tyler Batty, Gabe Murphy, Bo Richter. Obviously, Bo Richter was another one that they brought in that ended up making the practice squad, had a couple good preseason games. And then another edge rusher from Georgia that we'll probably talk about in a little bit here. But Yeah, I think he's a little smaller guy. He's not a guy that, he's not like this super explosive, crazy athlete. Like you said, he's a little older. Those BYU guys do their Latter-day Saints church mission, so that's why they're always a little bit older, because they do that for 2 years. But it sounds like he's a guy who can kind of come in, just kind of create havoc up front, and he seems like a Flores guy to me. So we'll see what happens with him. Maybe he has a solid preseason, makes the 53, or gets his way onto the practice squad.
Yeah, he's 6'6", 271. But if I recall, with Andre Carter, they put him on the practice squad in his first year, and they didn't really have plans of playing him just because he was too small.
I think he
And
actually made the 53 his first year. And
maybe
then
he did. They might have demoted him eventually, but
yeah, he was another guy who's a little bit smaller, skinnier guy.
he just kind of took almost a redshirt NFL year, if you want to say that, kind of just to hit the weight room and get bigger. And then, like we were saying, he ended up getting picked up somewhere else anyway. But that could be the same route they potentially take here. Maybe just include him at the bottom of the 53, or it might be dangerous to sneak him through waivers and put him on the practice squad. And then just kind of tell him, take a year, get bigger, get stronger, get more explosive, and then we'll come back to you next year and you can be a rotational player and maybe make a bigger impact in the future. Yep. That could be something here. So we'll just have to see. Also on BYU players, Jaren Hall was from BYU. Pretty sure he was like 26 or 27 as a rookie, if I remember. So that's kind of that. I think he was already married when he came into the NFL already.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
But could be wrong there. Just random recollection I have of him. But you brought up this guy, so we're going to move into that. The Vikings brought in an outside linebacker out of Georgia, so he's more accustomed to this scheme than Tyler Batty is. This guy, another good name, Chaz Chambliss. He had 6.5 sacks last year for Georgia, which was tied for most on the team. Projected 6th or 7th round pick. So, again, here's another guy. Could just be a practice squad development, future rotational guy here. But Georgia's a big name school, so maybe you have some more experience watching him at all. Not really sure.
Yeah, he's a guy who, like you said, 6.5 sacks. That's tied for the most sacks there. He's another guy that could come in and potentially make the team. He's a little lighter, like Tyler Batty is. He's not really able to slide inside, so he'll be an outside guy pretty strictly. He's a really tough guy. He can play special teams, which is obviously massive. So yeah, he's a guy who could maybe make the team through special teams, and he makes it as the 6th edge rusher or something. So another interesting project to watch. Kind of sensing a trend with these smaller guys. Obviously, Flores likes those guys. And Van Ginkel, Grenard's a little smaller. Chaz Chambliss obviously is smaller. Dallas Turner isn't massive. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so we just brought up Tyler Batty. Like we were saying, 6'6", 271. On the contrary, Chambliss is 6'1", 242. So
he's a lot smaller.
Significantly smaller. So he'll have some work to do on that if he wants to make it somewhere. But he's got the talent.
It sounds like he's a solid special teamer too, so he could make the team and play all the special teams, and that's obviously a big contribution.
Yeah, for sure there. So looking at the rest of the roster, trying to see if I missed anyone else here. I don't have notes on anyone else. They brought in a couple inside linebackers, Austin Keys and Dorian Mausi.
Yeah.
Mausi. Don't know how to pronounce that. Both of them are out of Auburn, so they were probably partners together.
Yeah.
Just like Ivan Pace, and he's not on the team anymore, but they brought in another UDFA the same year that was also out of Cincinnati.
Yeah. So, I don't think any of those guys have a chance to make the roster, but I have one more I would like to touch on.
Yeah.
And that is Oscar Chapman, punter out of Auburn. I think we're gonna have a camp punter competition again. Ryan Wright he's been all right. He's been up and down. I think Oscar Chapman's a guy who's going to come in and kind of challenge him. He punted for 5 seasons. 94% of his punts were down inside the 20-yard line. So he should receive. I mean, he's going to get a lot of opportunities here. And I don't think he's a guy that comes in and just gets cut before the first preseason game. I think they at least give him a few preseason games. And then, if Ryan Wright's doing good, Maybe they release him, but I think he's a guy who definitely has a shot at making their roster. So that's another battle to watch if you're a training camp psycho like I am, where you are paying attention to all these little guys. But Oscar Chapman is definitely a name to watch, and it would not shock me one bit if he is the Vikings punter this year.
So yeah, like we were saying earlier, he's the IPP, so International Player Pathway. He's from South Australia, so that's pretty cool. So this could be another thing where they put him on the practice squad, because if he's on the 53-man roster, he does count against the roster after it gets cut to 53. But he doesn't count against the practice squad if he's on the practice squad. So last year, that's what they did with the one tight end dude. He just kind of sat on the practice squad because it didn't take up a roster spot. Could be the same here. We'll just have to see. I'm not the biggest Ryan Wright fan in my life. His first training camp was a good old time. Hearing about him, number 66, nothing like punter with a big number. Also, this guy, Oscar Chapman's, as of now, his number's 91. So we could also have another high number punter. There really is nothing like college football, watching the punter trot out there, the kicker with number 90. Like, let's go.
My favorite by far ever is going to be Ryan Wright wearing number 66 in the preseason.
I don't know.
It's just so good.
In the NFL, players pre-2020 and beyond, players or punters and kickers could only wear numbers 1 through 19. And when they did the rule change on numbers, they can now wear anything 0 to 49 and 90 through 99. So any of those. So if he makes the team, he can stick with 91.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. No one would dislike that.
No.
So yeah, again, like I was kind of saying, I'm not the biggest Ryan Wright guy. Sometimes, I don't know, just not always a fan.
Yeah, he's a little inconsistent in my opinion. He can boom a punt for 60 yards and then he can just absolutely shank one that goes like 40.
Yeah.
So you'd like to see some more consistency out of him. Obviously, flipping the field and field position can be a big thing in the NFL, especially trying to flip the field on an opponent and make him drive that much longer. And so Ryan Wright maybe keeps his job or Oscar Chapman wins it, or who knows what happens. But that's just like I said, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
And just because Ryan Wright's the incumbent doesn't mean he can get beat out for it, because that's the exact same thing he did.
Yeah,
Jordan Berry out of also Australia, I'm pretty sure. He was the incumbent, and then Ryan Wright, this big UDFA, everyone was like, yo, who's this new linebacker coming in? Oh, wait, why is he punting? Oh, I guess he's a punter, also wearing number 66. Then he ended up winning the job. Could be the same thing here. So we'll just have to see what happens. I personally would prefer consistency over just power. It's great if you have a big, powerful leg, but it doesn't mean anything if every other punt is just a shank into the crowd. If it looks like I'm out there punting, that's a problem. That means you need to get someone better. That's what I think. So
yeah,
that's kind of that. They did, we won't go through them. They did bring in 3 more. Otherwise, we went through everyone else. They brought in 2 corners, Keenan Garber out of Kansas State and Zeamiah Vaughn out of Utah. Zeamiah is a great name. And then finally, they brought in a safety out of University of Miami, Michelle, I don't even know, Powell. And that completes, I'm pretty sure, unless I missed any, that completes the Vikings' 20 undrafted free agents that they brought in this year.
Yeah.
So that's that. Could some players make an impact? Potentially. I suppose we will just have to see what happens. So that's that. With that, we can probably continue moving forward into our predictions. There we go. Let me share. There we go. Okay, here we go. Here's our predictions. Off the board, we had only one. You had a wild prediction.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, came off in red.
Well, I was hopeful, but
yeah, it's too bad. You've probably been seeing around Twitter that they're the first team in a 10-year stretch to make the playoffs at least 8 times and lose in the first round in every single one of them. That's just torture. Yeah. At that point, just don't make the playoffs. What are we doing here?
If you would have told me after 2014 the Wolves would win a series before the Wild did, I would have said you were crazy. But
Yeah, that's
here we are. Wolves are playing tonight.
Yeah, we got a handful of Wolves predictions. You had them moving to the second round. We'll see tonight. They kind of got walloped the not night before, but I got faith that they'll come back. It's hard when you have like 5 days of rest. Hard to get back in the groove. So they'll be hopefully more prepared.
Yeah.
They're not going to lose both games at home. Ant Edwards didn't play great, but he's a good enough leader where he's going to say, we can't squander both games. We got to take at least one to Golden State. And I'm not scared of the Wolves going on the road because they did it twice in
they've been a great road
LA
team
and won. So
they've been a great road team in general this year too.
Yeah. Not worried about that. But just win games. That's really all I care about. I don't really care where. Just win games already. But we'll leave that at that. Moving along, I'll start with my first prediction. My first prediction is a Vikings prediction. It relates to their new quarterback. Unfortunately, I heard will not be at rookie minicamp this weekend. He's not eligible for whatever reason. I don't know all the rules and laws of the NFL. But it's JJ McCarthy. In week 1 of their season, don't know who it's going to be yet. We'll find out next week. And I spelled his name wrong. He will account for at least 3 touchdowns in their first game. I believe this past year, Darnold had 4. No, maybe he only had 3. They started with an Aaron Jones rushing touchdown. And then I don't even know what happened anymore.
Let's say Naylor caught a touchdown in that game. Maybe I'm crazy.
We're going to look up his by game. Week 1 is... Where is week 1? Oh, here it is. Giants. He had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So, guess he only had 2 touchdowns in that game. But McCarthy's going to have at least 3, whether it's passing, maybe using the wheels. I don't know what he's going to do, but that's kind of that. We'll just have to see what happens there. Moving forward, next one, I have 2 basketball ones. First one is relating to the Wolves. The Wolves will make at least 13 3-pointers in their game tonight. They have been historically bad in their past 2 games. In game 5 against the Lakers, which they won that game somehow, they had the most 3-point misses in a playoff game in NBA history, and they still won. And that record only stayed for like a few days because then the Celtics beat it. Not the game last night, but the one before.
Yeah.
But Wolves were also really bad. Took them till like midway through the third quarter the other night to make a 3-pointer, and then Target Center went nuts.
Yeah.
Forgot what it looked like to make one. So they're gonna get back on the hot shooting. Be honest, I actually don't think this is gonna happen, but I'm just kind of trying to will it into existence.
Well, I think they'll heat up again from 3. I'm not concerned about that.
I think they will. I don't know if it's gonna be a 1-game like turnaround swing, but maybe it'll be progressive. Who knows? What do I know? Last but not least, another Wolves one. Anthony Edwards will have at least one game of 40+ points. Kind of put up a dud the other night. Only had 1 point in the first half. Then in the third quarter, he was finally able to drive to the rim sometimes, but didn't make any 3-pointers. No, he did make 1, if I remember. Either way, not a great game from him, both from a leadership and on the court perspective. He's going to rebound because it's the Warriors. He just knocked out the Lakers, for goodness sakes. And now we got one of the other biggest market teams in the NBA, one of like 2 of the most iconic teams here. So, yeah, that's kind of that. So, there we go. There's my predictions.
All right, moving right along here. My first one is a Vikings one, and it is that exactly one of the Vikings 2025 draft picks will not make the initial 53-man roster. If you had to ask me right now, it's Gavin Bartholomew, but I think there's going to be one of them that gets cut, which, I mean, the Vikings don't cut draft picks very often, but I just I don't know, just a feeling. My second one is a Wolves one. It's that Naz Reid will have a 25+ point game, any game versus Golden State in this series. I think Naz was one of the only guys that showed up. I think he's an interesting matchup for Golden State. I think they're going to have some trouble guarding him and leaving him open. So I think he's due for a big game in this series. And then last but not least, Ty Felton will have under 200 receiving yards, but at least 5 touchdowns. I think he's going to be a guy who they kind of go after in the red zone. That's what he was at Maryland, and I think it's going to continue here.
He feels like a guy that could have some touchdowns in the preseason for sure.
Yeah. It'll be exciting to watch in the preseason for sure.
So, yeah, that's that. There's our predictions. Hopefully the Wolves one come to fruition. But we'll just have to see. Looking here, I'm 2 for 10 so far. Sam Z 0 for 3, yet to get on the board with a correct one. Big Lou and Matt have not had any predictions yet that have come off the board, and you're at 27%. So that's kind of that. I think I'll always love how you said Aaron Rodgers will sign with the Steelers and how Matt says Aaron Rodgers will play next season, but we just got to wait. Wait till it happens.
Just keeps dragging this thing out.
Remember, it's Aaron Rodgers. He takes forever to do things. So eventually it'll happen, but we'll see. So that's that. Otherwise, that does it for this episode. As a heads up to all the folks out there, life update for me. I start an internship next week. That's Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. Oh, wow. So it's going to be tough for me to really do much during the weeks anymore. But if you or anyone else wants to take the reins, otherwise maybe I can occasionally do weekends or a weeknight or something, but it's going to be tougher for me over the summer than it was last year. But yeah, if any of Matt, if you're watching this too, this also applies to you. Do you guys want to take the reins and whip up some episodes? Feel free. Even if can't do it, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I'll text you about it. The summer's going to be, coming around June-ish here. It's going to be tough for me too. I'm working 8 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday. So
we're in the same boat.
We could figure. So the summer's probably be pretty quiet on here, but maybe in the next few weeks I can get something going or get something together. So
yeah. Hopefully we can, for the fans, hopefully we can get some episodes going. But remember, at the end of the day, we're just college students, and this isn't our job. This is just a hobby podcast here that we're doing for fun. So it's not really number one on our priority list. But yeah. So with that said in mind, I don't know when our next episode is going to be, but whenever it is, take care, everybody. Enjoy. If you're in college, do good on your finals. If you're not in college, I don't know, just do good in life. But otherwise, that does it for this one. Like we were saying, don't know when we'll see you next, but we'll see you guys sometime again. Take care. Peace out. As always, SKOL Vikings, but more importantly, Wolves back. See you later.
Yes, sir.